Jerry Goss, and I'm a flight attendant at American Airlines. I love everything that you guys do. I love the messaging that you get out. I love that you're reaching an untapped market, and I love that you're pulling people into the fray that are usually uninformed. I think that we have to take a moment to regroup and find new strategies and new ways of communicating a message to be able to change the outcome of the next election.
It is April 27th, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm your host for this week, Tatum Owens, and here at Progress Texas, we amplify progressive values, leaders, and actions. Through our no paywall podcasts and digital media, we make Texas politics easy to understand and participate in. Lies in Texas are well funded by the far right, but your support for fact-based independent media hands the mic to millions of Texans. Our thanks to Karen Coyningham, Ben Luckins, and Kristen Hartwell for their ongoing, sustaining support. Starting off with the biggest story of the weekend, the most recent assassination attempt on Donald Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on April 25th. The shooter, Cole Thomas Allen, was apprehended and called himself a friendly federal assassin, according to AP News. The Dallas Morning News' Joseph Morton provided a first-hand account from the dinner and shooting in attendance with other Hearst newspapers correspondents, sharing, "It was a surreal mix, part dinner, part breaking news chaos, all unfolding at once. A scary ordeal for all involved, I'm sure, and glad that our journalists made it home safe." The rise in political violence left some with remarks. For Trump, the intended victim, it's appearing, he said, "It's always shocking when something like this happens. Happened to me a little bit, and that never changes." Always some fun things from him, in reference to what marks the third attempt on his life in less than 2 years. A wild world we are living in, where the president understands the reality of every American who faces increased political violence, from that waged by those with barely regulated, deeply unsafe guns, to those who wage war against our neighbors, like certain ICE agents have proven themselves to be. Speaking of, an update from Alex Wen and Aiden Runnels at the Texas Tribune on the building story from the last 2 weeks, reporting that after the events in Houston, increasing cooperation between the Houston Police Department and ICE, 2 more cities, Austin and Dallas, have revised their police policies to allow for the same process. This ultimatum, handed down from Governor Greg Abbott, put millions of public safety grant funding at stake. What this means for Texans in the most populous parts of the state is that their police departments are enabled to invite ICE in instead of ICE out when detained people have warrants from ICE. Makes you question what public safety is really about. Meanwhile, on the note of juiced-up police, Alejandro Serrano at the Texas Tribune shared an update on Senate Bill 4, ruled on by the Federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, stating that it can take effect, and now Texas police can arrest people they suspect of entering the country illegally. Of course, this presents constitutional challenges, with immigration being mainly under the federal government's oversight, and in fact, this was initially blocked by a lower court ruling. But the Fifth Circuit loves making Texas a worse place to live in, so here we are. Here we are indeed, and pivoting to the last week of Earth Month, an opportunity to review some key impacts and new statistics on water, air, climate, energy, and agriculture concerns for our state, which of course reverberates with influence across the nation. First up, from Emily Foxhall at the Texas Tribune, Texas legislators will meet this week for the first public session between joint investigating committees to hear testimony on the July 4th floods that killed hundreds of Texans, including the victims at Camp Mystic. This developed with news that Camp Mystic is still planning to reopen in less than 2 months, despite emergency plans that don't fulfill requirements for youth camp licensing, and after court battles between the camp and victims' families. I know everyone following this story wants a change for the better, for the victims' families to be served justice in these very unjust circumstances, and that our legislators who visited the property will take note of remarks this week and add to measures passed last year, including flood warning sirens in the Hill Country that are certainly a start. Let's hope they address climate concerns for the state as a whole so this does not happen again. So that's where we stand with water for the week. And as for air, Dina Aravallo at MySA shared a report from the American Lung Association demonstrating that of all the states in the U.S., we Texans have the honor of living in the worst for air quality overall. No surprise for folks who live near unregulated oil and gas buildout, like most of us, I would say. But For a snapshot, take Houston, Pasadena, which holds the 4th spot for cities most polluted by ozone, followed by DFW in 9th and El Paso in 16th. And for Brownsville and McAllen, both of which rank in the top 10 most polluted cities by daily particulate matter in the U.S. We know why we rank this way, at the bottom, or the top, really, unfortunately. And especially for folks in the RGV, you can see the source with an infusion of industrial and corporate interests dedicating billions of funding toward creating more pollution, really, focusing on LNG for that region. Not great. Most of the news today, not great. I will cop to that. And of course, this report notes the influence of data centers as a growing concern and source for air pollution. That, of course, comes from power consumption used and diesel generator emissions. Ellen Thomas at Business Insider shared a poignant take regarding that piece of this puzzle, saying, quote, "Everything is bigger in Texas, and that includes the data center demand straining its power grid," unquote. Definitely true. Texans across the state are feeling the impacts and apparently breathing worse air for it of the massive infrastructure and funding dedicated toward data centers, ramping up for our state to become the world capital for development by 2030. To me, it seems misplaced for our state in an active drought, now owning the title for worst air quality, to invite in what could become extremely destructive infrastructure. Meanwhile, ERCOT reports that demand will likely quadruple in the next 6 years because of the energy required to run these operations and connect to the grid. Speaking of the grid, which we all want to be better and seems to only do worse, Claire Howe at the Dallas Morning News reports that our state, the nation's energy capital, shuts off the most utility customers. That report shows how utility bill costs have risen over the years. Don't need a report for that, thank you. I'm happy to show my energy bill. And demonstrated that folks who can't afford increased utility costs just got shut off more than any other state. That's 3 million shutoffs for your count, with most states accounting for close to $500K on average, a huge disparity there. Let's also note that costs don't project downward and will only increase with extreme weather events paired with jacked prices from private energy, and will only increase further because of shared demand from data centers using your energy. Kinda sorta tired of leading the world in energy production and losing out because Greg Abbott wants a privatized, separate grid that makes it worse for us. Thank you to Greg Casar, another Greg, who has continuously filed a Connect the Grid Act. And I wonder what it will take, perhaps another Winter Storm Uri or more, to get measures passed so our neighbors are protected from record heat and cold. FYI, Central Texas is facing potential record-breaking 100-degree temps this week. Anyway, for our last story before I let you go about this last week of April, and on the note of our Congress members working on environmental concerns, Rep. David Scott of Georgia passed away last week. The first black chairman of the House Agriculture Committee was 80 years old and up for re-election, with concerns for his health going back to 2022. Malcolm Ferguson at the New Republic reported that he is the 11th Democratic member of Congress to die in office since 2020. Relating this back to Texas, where our own CD18 has suffered the loss of 2 Congress members in succession, of course, Reps. Sheila Jackson Lee and Sylvester Turner, we understand the imperative to elect leaders that will continue to hold power and hand it down. Now is not the time to rest on laurels, but pass batons, I think. Our condolences to the late congressman's family, and horrible news that unfortunately feels familiar. Hopefully, it inspires some change and intergenerational power exchanges for the better. That's all we've got for today, but before you go, a fun time we had here today, right? Super positive stuff. In all seriousness, you can take action this week, with today marking that last day to register to vote for the midterm runoff elections. And don't forget, there are not 1, but 2 Texas elections on the calendar. Local city-level elections this week on May 2nd, and the statewide primary runoffs on May 26th. Early voting in these local elections is underway now and ends tomorrow, April 28th. And for the midterm runoffs, early voting will begin on May 18th. More of all of this at our carefully crafted voting information website, govotetexas.org, and there's a nice online tool from the Texas Tribune that shows you exactly who will be on your runoff ballot based on your address and party. See that link in the show notes. And we have not one but two live events on the calendar right now in both Dallas and the Houston area. First, we'll be in Cypress at the very cool Creekwood Grill for a live podcast taping with new Cyfair ISD board members. And we want you to be there, but seating is limited. So RSVP, it is required to attend, and this happens on the evening of Wednesday, May 20th. See the show notes for a link to get registered. Here at Progress Texas, we're also getting ready for our 16th anniversary celebration in Dallas with drinks, light bites, and a fun review of the highlights of our successes over the last few years. Save the date, which is Tuesday, June 16th, and see the link in the show notes to reserve your spot. Plus, snag some merch to match your values. Our web store is live and ready for you to grab your favorite Humans Against Abbott, Y'all Means All, and Resist shirts, stickers, and buttons hitting the summer. That is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for today. Links to all of these original stories can be found in our show notes. When lies in Texas are well funded by the far right, your support for fact-based reporting is needed and appreciated. I'm Tatum Owens. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again tomorrow.